The more I look into the Goodreads Choice Awards, the less sense it makes. So today we are talking about the Goodreads Choice Awards snubs, the books that really should have made the Goodreads Choice Awards but did not. I just want to say this is all in good fun. I don't take the Goodreads Choice Awards that seriously. I understand they are a popularity contest and I'm just trying to have fun with them, and I hope you have fun watching this video. I am only going to be talking about the science fiction, fantasy, and young adult fantasy categories. And I am going to kick this video off with the most egregious snubs. So previously, Goodreads has not nominated any self-published books, but if self-published books were picked up by traditional publishers, Goodreads would nominate those books in the year that they were traditionally published. And this year they did not do that. I had 3 books on my predictions for the Goodreads Choice Award nominees that were previously self-published and were published by a traditional publisher this year. And they all have great ratings. They have lots of people shelving it and rating it. And they are not among the nominees. What's crazy about this is if you look at Blood Over Brighthaven, it has a 4.4 average rating on Goodreads, which there's only one book in all of the fantasy category that has a higher average rating than Blood Over Brighthaven. That is Empire of the Damned with a 4.5 average rating. So how is Blood Over Brighthaven not on the list? Blood Over Brighthaven also has over 100,000 people shelving it. There are books on the nominees that have less than 100,000 people shelving it, that have fewer people rating it. Another book I predicted would be on the fantasy category is Can't Spell Treason Without T. This book has a 3.7 average rating, but again, so many people shelving and reviewing this book. And it's not on our nominees. And even more egregious than these ones is our science fiction previously but published by a traditional publisher this year, and that is Dungeon Crawler Carl. Do you know how high the average rating is on Dungeon Crawler Carl? Dungeon Crawler Carl's average rating is higher than every single book in the science fiction category. It even has more people shelving it and more people rating it than most of the books in the science fiction category. Dungeon Crawler Carl has a 4.53 average rating with 36,000 people rating it. That is so many people rating it, and it yet still has such a high average rating. What is going on? I don't know if they're looking at data in the background, like the number of people that shelved and rated these books in 2024, but I'm not sure if that makes sense since there are books that people are shelving and even rating now that are not published until next year or 2 years from now. Particularly if there's books announced in a series, sometimes there will be placeholder books on Goodreads that people are already shelving. So I don't know, maybe they're looking at data on the back end, or maybe they just decided these books were not originally published in 2024. Wow. These books were not originally published in 2024. So maybe that's why they're not including them, but they included books, audiobooks that were not originally published in 2024, but maybe had a new version published. They included In Ascension. Oh my gosh, if we're talking about the science fiction category, In Ascension was published in 2023 and the paperback was published in 2024. In Ascension was published before the cutoff date in 2023. I don't, if you look at the books, if you try too hard to understand, it stops making sense. Continuing with science fiction, the other one that really surprises me is The Last Murder at the End of the World. This book has 28,000 ratings and over 180,000 people shelving it. It is super, super popular. Maybe they decided it was not actually science fiction, or it had too low of a average rating since it has a 3.66. Their official cutoff is 3.5 or higher is the rating that books can have to be nominees. It definitely appears that they look at ratings somewhat, which I will get into whenever we talk about the fantasy books. But I'm really surprised The Last Murder at the End of the World was not on this list. And since we're talking about snubs, I am just going to talk about some of my favorite science fiction books that were published this year, but did not have enough people reading, reviewing, shelving these books to make the science fiction category. Not that any of that data appears to matter, but let's get into it. First, I'm going to go with Lost Ark Dreaming. I read this back in May and it skyrocketed to my book of the year. I have an entire review on this book, which I will have linked if you want to know all of my thoughts. But it was amazing and it's super short, so no excuses not to read it. The only thing about this one is it has a 3.6 average rating on Goodreads. But the people on Goodreads are wrong and I am right, so you should listen to me. Obviously, everyone has different opinions about things, but this is among my favorite books of the year. And then I am currently reading The Practice, the Horizon, the Chain. I am halfway through it and it's super duper short, so again, no excuses not to read it. And this book is like shattering my top 10 of the year list. It is so good. It is crashing its way onto that list. I will be surprised. I mean, maybe it takes a turn for the worst here at the end, but I will be surprised if this book is not among my top 10 at the end of the year. And I have read some amazing books this year, so be on the lookout for that. And this one has a 3.9 average rating on Goodreads. So if 3.6 is too low for you, you can decide to trust the people on Goodreads instead of me and still read this one. And moving into fantasy, as I already said, Can't Spell Treason Without T and Blood Over Bright Haven are not among the books on this list. And that is a sadness because I've only read one of them. Actually, I DNF'd one of them. But you shouldn't listen to me, but they're super popular and people love them. I am actually really looking forward to reading Blood Over Bright Haven. It is on my list. I want to read books next year. The really interesting thing about the fantasy category, though, is the lowest rated book on this list is a 3.6 average rating, and that goes to Academy of Liars. The reason this is super interesting is because I believe ratings played a factor into why some books were nominated on the fantasy category and others were overlooked. When I was putting my predictions together, I had so many books that I predicted ahead of Dead Cattail Assassins, yet Dead Cattail Assassins made the Goodreads Choice Award nominees, and the other books that I predicted ahead of it, well, a lot of them did not make it. Dead Cattail Assassins, however, has a 3.98 average rating with over 3,000 people rating it. And I believe this is why it made the nominations, because it has a higher average rating than most of the other books I predicted yet failed to make the list. There are two books that I predicted that would make the Goodreads Choice Award nominees that have more people shelving it and at least the same average rating or higher than Dead Cattail Assassins, and they both still failed to make the list. And they are Dragon Rider and The Silverblood Promise. The Silverblood Promise has a 4.0 average rating with 2.7 thousand people rating it. So it has slightly fewer people rating it, but it has more people shelving it than Dead Cattail Assassins. So I wonder, I feel like maybe all of this data is combined and they somehow take like an average of like, well, we're gonna look at shelving data and number of people rating and average rating. But when you look at sci-fi, there's some books that have less than 1,000 people rating those books. So none of it makes sense. I also feel like Cemetery of Untold Stories was snubbed simply because it is a magical realism. Now it does have a 3.6 average rating, but as I said, the lowest rated book that made the lowest rated nominee also has a 3.6 rating. So that should not have disqualified it. But most magical realism books don't make the Goodreads Choice Award nominees in the fantasy category. And for a book that I did not predict was going to make the nominations, but if we're looking at ratings, has a very good chance of making the nominations, that is A Daughter's War. The Daughter's War has a 4.31 average rating, and over 4,000 people rating this book, and it has over 23,000 people shelving this book. So this is a very popular book with a very good rating, with a lot of people rating it. I think that should qualify it for a nominee. So even though I did not predict it to make the list because I didn't think it had enough people shelving it to make the nominees, I'm going to say if we combine rating in with the nominees, The Daughter's War could very easily have made the nominations. And for a lesser known book that should have made the nominations just because I read it this year and loved it, that is In the Shadow of the Fall. This is, it's an awesome fantasy story. I have a review video, which I will have linked here and here, if you want to see all of my thoughts on In the Shadow of the Fall. And finally, we're going to talk about YA fantasy, and this one also really puzzles me. So I predicted A Tempest of Tea could make the nominees and win the category. And A Tempest of Tea is not a nominee in the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I cannot figure out why, because it has twice as many people both rating and reviewing this book than most of the other nominees in the category. It does have a 3.5 average rating though. So I wonder if the 3.5 average rating is what made it not eligible, even though whenever you look at their eligibility criteria, it's 3.5 or higher that is eligible. So according to their criteria, this book should be a nominee. My other questions are, is there any controversy surrounding this book? Could that be a reason why it's not on the list? I'm not really sure. I don't have any other YA fantasy snubs because I've not read any new YA fantasy this year, unfortunately. But those are my snubs. Let me know your snubs in the comments, even if it's just a really underrated book with like very few people talking about it, but you absolutely loved it this year and you think should win an award. Tell me in the comments, and I hope to see you in another video. Happy reading!